representatives there in the General Assembly who agreed with what he said, but they would not back him up or speak out because they were afraid of the repercussions. And so I really feel in a lot of ways the UN is very ineffective in these ways and could be more effective. I know that's a little touchy, but I did want to bring up that position. And then lastly, you mentioned about the enemy, and I think I am an indigenous woman. My relatives come from Iraq. My ancestors come from Iraq. And so that country is being abominated and the people are being killed. And I feel that very personally as an American and as an indigenous woman with relations there. And what bothers me very much is what I see is a lot of Assyrian people in the United States are seeking the assistance of the United States government in protecting them. And I feel that they also have a lot of animosity towards the Islamic nation. And I think this is a clear case to me of not really identifying the enemy. I think it's important, and you said, to know the enemy, and I don't think that can be underscored enough. We have too many incidents of false flag operations where this is part of the education that I think we need to do, and I just wanted to bring that forward because I think that's a very important part of the education of people of the world, as well as the American people.
I'll just say this on the United Nations. It's an organization, it's a club. It has a agreed set of, and until the United States of America agrees to operate as a functioning member with full respect for the rule of law that we helped write, the United Nations will never function appropriately. Why did those nations, why were they afraid to show support? Because the United States was lying behind the scenes economic threats. That if they remain silent, then this contract will go through, this aid will go through. If they speak out, we will pull that aid. And when you're dealing with impoverished nations, they can't afford to lose American aid. Is this goodwill on the part of the U.S. government? No. Again, it's the hubris of our nation saying it's our way or the highway. Definition of the enemy. Look, what we've done in Iraq is we've taken a horribly complicated situation that we don't fully comprehend as a government or as a people, and we've tried to grossly oversimplify it. One way to oversimplify it is making everything black and white. There's the right way, there's the wrong way, you have the good guys, you have the bad guys. And I mean, we've had, speak of the Assyrian people, we have a contradictory policy towards the Assyrian people. On the one hand, we claim to be wanting to assist them. On the other hand, we empower Kurds and persecute them in Kirkuk. It's a nightmare, but that's only a small subset of the overall problem, which is the 25 million people who call themselves citizens of Iraq, whether they be Assyrian, Kurd, Turkmen, Arab, Sunni, Shia. UN report came out, 1 million people have died as a direct result of this war. There's 25 million to begin with. Thanks to our invasion and occupation of Iraq, we have killed 1 in 25 Iraqis. And yet, we don't see our nation collectively holding its head in shame. We killed 2.2 million Iraqis in the time of sanctions. One of the problems with this concept of enemy and foe is we've got to overcome what I'll call a collective racism that exists in the United States of America, where we put an American life above any other human life, where we can lose 3,700 plus troops in week, as we should, but then stay dry-eyed when we recognize at the same time we've killed 1 million people. We've refused to understand that a human is a human. And whether you read the Quran, or you read the Bible, or you read the Torah, that when you wake up in the morning, you're a mother, you want your children to wake up in a peaceful world. You want your children to get an education. You want your children to succeed. And somehow we collectively feel that if you're a Muslim, you don't share these same human sensibilities. We have failed as a people, and it manifests itself in the ignorant approach that we take towards dealing with the rest of the world. And I will say this, I've said it before, you cannot solve a problem that you don't properly define. Think about that. If you don't define the problem, how can you solve it? America runs around telling the world that we have the solution. Solution to what? Global problems that we are manifestly ignorant of. We have the arrogance to believe that because of our extreme power that we can, force a nation to conform. and we have no respect for the reality of the problem on the ground. We're trying to solve the problem in Iraq based upon domestic political imperative here at home, as opposed to the on-the-ground reality of Iraq. And that means we'll never have a solution to Iraq. We're going to go to war against Iran because of an artificial reality we created here at home, as opposed to the reality of what's going on. And I just came from Iran a couple months ago. You know how you stop a war in Iran? Issue every American a passport, round-trip ticket, $10,000, and send them there as tourists for 2 weeks. You do that, 99.999% of the Americans will come back and say, I want to go back. That was fantastic. These are great people, because they are great people. And we could never convince our nation to go to war with them. But that's empowerment through the acquisition of knowledge and information. That's what our government does. Yes, ma'am.
My question is about I was wondering, you as a military person address your estimate as a guest in this country, or not this country, for this administration, that you consider actually launching an attack if you think, including nuclear weapons, to go after what they think nuclear sites. And I was about to say, given that we can't address the strategy here, but we just used one about stopping this administration from actually attacking. Part of my sense of the problem is that the media has been complicit in the administration's war, and they refuse to address the consequences of such an attack. And part of the solution might be helping the media by contacting Congress to inform them what our opinions of what might happen after such an attack. Do you have a paper or suggestions to where we might go for information, but describe the consequences of such an attack?
I've written extensively on the subject, and so have others. So there's data out there. We're more than happy to provide the coordinators with some links and some things I've written about it. You know, just in short, anybody who's been in the military knows that no plan survives initial contact with the enemy. You can come with the greatest plan in the world. The first bullet goes down range, throw the plan away because you make it up as you go along from now on. And for all the people that sit there and believe that we can fight a attainable conflict with Iran, remember the Iranians have a vote. And the second we bomb, they will respond in a way that maybe we haven't predicted, we haven't prepared for. And because of Iran's position geographically, because of its status as one of the major oil producers in the world today, because of the leverage that Iranian energy has on developing economies, divorcing Iran from the economic structures of modern economic society would have a devastating consequence for the world. If you think the American economy is teetering on the brink of collapse right now, remove Iranian oil and energy from the equation and watch what occurs. How do we, is this administration going to go to war? Ma'am, this administration is at war with Iran. As we speak, the United States government is using covert action through proxies and through direct action to target for assassination and destruction, and the target for destabilization, persons, organizations, and structures inside Iran. So your taxpayer money is already being used to fund warlike actions against Iran. Our military has prepared itself to initiate and sustain an aerial bombardment, and there are plans in the works for limited ground troop involvement in Iran. All we need is authorization from the President to do this. Now, some people say the President needs to go to Congress. He does not need to go to Congress. Congress has already given the President all the authority necessary to wage war. Read very carefully the two existing war powers resolutions on the books. The first one in 2001, the second one in 2002. The first one authorized military force after 9/11, the second one authorized military force against Iraq. Both say that the President can use military power against those nations, groups, entities, individuals, etc., that are linked to the events of 9/11. Read the President's State of the Union address earlier this year. He has linked Iran with Al-Qaeda. He continues to link Iran with Al-Qaeda. Anybody who studies the Middle East understands that Shia fundamentalists cannot peacefully coexist with Sunni Wahhabist fundamentalists. But this president somehow convinced the average American that they're working closely together. They don't understand that Iran, under the mullahs, almost went to war against Afghanistan because Afghanistan was providing safe haven to Al-Qaeda. That the Iranians are